Britain's mixed-race GI babies want to know why they were given away. A wedding ring and a photograph are all Leon Lomax has left of his mother, a woman he has longed to know his whole life. Leon's white British mother met his African-American GI father when he was stationed at RAF Birch, an airbase in Essex, southeast England. When Leon was born in December 1945, his mother, who was unmarried, left him in a children's home. He has a distant, Leon, now 73, is still haunted by the choice his mother made. For decades, Leon is not alone. Historian Lucy Bland estimates that around 2,000 mixed-race children were born in the UK to British women and African American servicemen between 1943 and 1946. The U.S. Army refused permission for black GIs to marry their pregnant white girlfriends, and so the babies they gave birth to were branded illegitimate. The social stigma of having a mixed-race child out of wedlock was too much for many mothers to cope with, and so many of the children were given up. Between a third and half of the babies are thought to have been placed in children's homes, according to Bland, who told some of their stories in her book. The term was coined. Of the 45 former GI babies Bland interviewed, Leon was the only one later adopted by his father. Corporal Oscar Lomax was already married when he met Leon's mother Maud, but after returning to the U.S. at the end of the war, he tracked Leon down and had the then 3-year-old flown to the U.S. in January 1949. But there was to be no happy ending for Leon. His stepmother died suddenly when he was 8 years old, and his father sent him to live with a succession of aunts and uncles. There was always someone missing, Leon did eventually trace his mother, but it was too late. Maud had died too, when African American GIs, many of whom came from the Deep South, served in Britain. The U.S. Army forced them to abide by the GIM. But many white British women paid no attention to such rules and attended black. When Lucy found one case in which a black GI who said he wanted to marry his pregnant girlfriend was told by his commanding officer if such attitudes mean that many of the brown, around 20 of the so-called brown, Deborah Pryor and Carol Edwards, both 74, were given up by their mothers and sent to Holnacote House in 1945. Their best childhood, everything. It wasn't until they were packed off at the age of 5, far away from everything they'd ever known and other children who looked like them, that Deborah and Carol say their struggles with their identity began. Deborah was adopted by a childless couple named Sid and Queenie, who lived on the other side of the country. Carol was never adopted. Instead, after decades of searching, Deborah managed to find her mother, but only got to meet her once, briefly, on the condition set by her half-sister that she didn't reveal who she was. A war-widowed teacher, who already had 2 children when she fell pregnant, Deborah's mother told her Carol tracked down her father, but theirs wasn't the reunion she'd hoped for. Instead it was an In contrast to Leon, Deborah, and Carol, Dave Green, 74, grew up knowing exactly who and how loved he was. His mother Joan Bagwell was just 18 years old when she met his father, Corporal David Green, a photographer in the U.S. Army, in Yeovil, southwestern England. He invited her to it. Corporal Green, from North Carolina, wooed Joan's family with homemade peach cobblers and was well received by her parents, but they drew the line at letting their daughter move to the U.S. By the time Dave was born in August 1945, his father had left the UK, but he sent money to help Joan raise his child, and continued to urge her to join him in America. Joan refused to give in to pressure and give Dave up despite facing the joint stigmas of illegitimacy and racism. Eventually, Joan married a local man who brought Dave up as if he was his own son, and stood up for him in the face of racist abuse. But Dave says she continued to hold a torch for his father. When he was 12, Dave and his mother received Valentine's cards from his father. Dave and his father wrote to each for a couple of years until a change of address meant that they lost contact for decades. Then, when he was 53, Dave managed to track down a phone number for his father, and called him up, asking the man at the other end of the line if he had been in England during the war. When he replied yes, Dave and his father spent the next 2 hours talking. A month later, in July 1999, Dave flew to New York to meet his father for the first time. Dave's father died in 2009, his mother a year later. Dave was lucky enough to know both his parents, but for hundreds of Britain's other mixed-race GI babies, the search for answers about their identity continues.
Raindrop, drop top, top smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park.